Now, to talk about the Eurozone post-French and Greek elections, I'm joined from our Melbourne studios by Dr. Stephen Auer, who's an author and senior lecturer at Latrobe University. Stephen Auer, welcome. You've written in the past few weeks that the policies of Francois Hollande could well ruin France as well as Europe. Do you stand by those?
Absolutely. I mean, the crucial aspect of the results of these elections is the Franco-German relationship, and we know that Angela Merkel opposes Hollande's policies. Obviously, the first thing that will happen is that they will both meet and they will both pretend that they can reach an agreement, a compromise, and they will talk about growth. But we also know that the strategies that they both want to employ to create growth across Europe differ radically. And unless and until France and Germany work together, nothing can happen in Europe. So the entire strategy that has been developed and that has been expressed through the fiscal pact that all the Eurozone countries promised to ratify, the entire strategy is now in tatters.
So economically, what will happen?
Well, I think we are going to see increase of instability, and whoever might have thought that the Eurozone the Eurozone crisis was over will now watch the whole thing unfolding again. I mean, you also reported on the results of the Greek elections, and Greece will prove ungovernable, as was expected. And I think that the Greek situation is a foretaste of things to come across the entire Eurozone. Just as Greece is going to be ungovernable, Europe will be ungovernable.
And socially, could this lead to unrest as well?
Well, absolutely. This is what I find frightening. I mean, The Economist magazine ran a story a couple of weeks ago about the French leadership being in denial because, indeed, the state sector is far too large. 56% of the economy is controlled by the French state. The debt is very high and unsustainable, about 90% of the GDP. And both leaders, both Sarkozy, in fact, and Hollande promised that things can improve. Hollande made more outlandish promises, and so he's bound to disappoint his voters. In fact, he can only deliver on those promises if he gets support from Germany, which I don't see forthcoming. But if, in turn, the German Chancellor accepts Hollande's demands, then she will profoundly disappoint her electorate. So I think people are bound to be disappointed by this. I think that people themselves live in denial. If the French people think that they can get more support from the state that has no resources to support them, then they live in denial too.
What do you make of the performance of this neo-Nazi party in Greece?
Well, that is pretty frightening, but again, unfortunately, it is not unexpected. I warned as far back as 2 years ago when the Eurozone crisis erupted that what we will see is the rise of xenophobic sentiments across the Eurozone. And you see, the terrible constellation that has occurred through the Eurozone crisis is that, whether we like it or not, Germany is the most powerful player because it is doing better than anyone else in the Eurozone. And obviously, in countries like Greece, or in fact Portugal, to some extent even Ireland, anti-German sentiments have always been there latently. I mean, less so in Ireland, less so in Portugal, but Greeks were never that fond of Germans. And now that extremist party talks about, you know, the Fourth Reich and how they will defend Greek interests against German preponderance. So the project that was meant to unify all Europeans, the single currency, is really pulling Europe apart. I cannot see how Greece can remain within the Eurozone under these circumstances. It cannot regain competitiveness, and it cannot be governed. It cannot be governed. The parties that were in favor of the austerity measures that enable Greece to remain in the Eurozone have no longer a majority. You cannot rule in a democracy against the wish of the people.
Unfortunately, a pretty bleak outlook. Stephen Auer, thanks very much for talking to us today.
You're welcome.